Moving over to asymmetric encryption, this is an entirely new player. We've used symmetric encryption for thousands of years, but we've only used asymmetric encryption for practical purposes for 40 or 50 years. In the 1970s, multiple asymmetric encryption types were developed. That includes Diffie-Hellman from 1976, and RSA, which is named from its developers just like Diffie-Hellman, Rivest, Shamir, and Edelman from 1997. And the big difference in asymmetric cryptography is that you use two keys. You have a public key and a private key. That's a key pair. Your public key is, well, public. People can get a hold of it. People use that to encrypt messages they send to you. Since you use one key for encryption and a different key for decryption, if someone were to intercept the message sent to you, they can't decrypt it with your public key. Only your private key can decrypt it. And your private key, you keep that safe. And that's what you use to decrypt messages sent to you using your public key. Does that make sense? If you need to send a message to someone else, you would use their public key to encrypt the message. They would then use their private key to decrypt the message. This can also be used for digital signatures. The order is slightly reversed, and we'll look at those later. When you use normal asymmetric encryption, the point is to keep our secret secret. It's the confidentiality leg of the CIA triad. With digital signatures, we want authenticity and non-repudiation. We want to be able to prove that the email came from whoever sent it, or whoever signed the document. So in that case, you would encrypt with your private key, and the recipient would decrypt with your public key. Since your public key can decrypt the message, it has to have come from you. This does in no way provide confidentiality. That's not the point of it. The point is, we get non-repudiation. To make asymmetric cryptography secure, we use a lot of one-way functions. And a function is a function that's easy to do one way, but very difficult to do in reverse. It can be easy to multiply two numbers. It's going to be a lot harder to reverse engineer the numbers. Figure out if you have the result, which numbers did it come from. The example I have here is very simplistic, and the prime numbers I use are only 4 digits. But you get the point how it works. If I multiply 1373 with 8081, I get 11,095,213. It's not a difficult task for most people to multiply those two numbers. But if you only have the result, how much time would you use to figure out that that number, the 11,095,213, was actually done by multiplying the two first numbers? It's going to take you much more time, and that's how one-way functions work. Easy to multiply one way, very difficult to reverse. So for asymmetric encryption, we either use prime number factorization, where we use very high prime numbers, multiply them, and then use the result as the encryption key. On the next slide, I'll show you an example of how large prime numbers we're actually talking. Discrete logarithms are very much the same, but instead of using large prime numbers, in the example I have here, 5 to the 12th power is 244,140,625. Again, with a cheap calculator, anyone could do that calculation, but trying to reverse engineer it is again harder. And since we have the two keys, and you can't reverse engineer one key if you have the other, that's why asymmetric encryption is so nice. We can send it over an untrusted medium like the internet and still keep our secret secret. In RSA cryptography, we make a new key pair from very large prime numbers. And what it's mostly used for is what we talked about earlier, exchanging the shared secret key for symmetric encryption. Since RSA was patented in 1977, and since you already know patents last for 20 years, in 1997 it was released into the public domain. Anyone can use it without paying for it. RSA can use from 1094 bits all the way up to 4096 bit keys. It is considered secure. Below here we have an example of an RSA key. This is a 704-bit key, and this one was broken. That's why we know the prime numbers used. I'm obviously not going to bother with reading that string of numbers, but when I say huge prime numbers, you now know what I mean. So in this case, for the RSA 704, you'd multiply the two first numbers, the one starting with 81 and 90, and the result, which would be your encryption key, is the one below it, the one starting with 74. And obviously it's not impossible to reverse engineer that encryption, but it's very, very difficult. The guy who did find the vulnerability was not actually able to do that, but he found a side channel with a vulnerability, and with that he could reverse engineer the numbers. We briefly touched on Diffie-Hellman earlier. In most people's eyes, that really was the first asymmetric encryption that was used publicly and on the internet. Just like the other asymmetric encryptions, it allowed us to exchange our shared symmetric keys over an unsecured medium. Diffie-Hellman is still in use, but it's not very much today. Just recognize that it's an asymmetric key. It's one of the earliest one, if not the earliest one, and how it works. ECC, or elliptic curve cryptography, it uses discrete logarithms, but it uses them on elliptic curves. and it's much stronger per bit than normal logarithms, which of course is great, but then again it's also patent protected. You actually have to pay for every device you use it on. It's frequently used on devices where power consumption is a concern. You can use it with a lot less compute because the key lengths are so much smaller. A 250-bit elliptical curve key is just as strong as a 3072-bit RSA key. LGML, like the others, is asymmetric encryption used for public key cryptography. It's based on the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and it's widely used in the free GNU Privacy Guard software, recent versions of PGP, or Pretty Good Privacy, and other current crypto systems. DSA, or Digital Signature Algorithm, uses a different algorithm for signing encryption than RSA does, but it still provides the same level of security. In the first phase, we choose the algorithm parameters that's shared between the different users of the system, and the second phase, it calculates the private and public keys for a single user. And then finally we have Knapsack, or Merkle-Hellman Knapsack Crypto System as it's also called. Yes, that's the same Hellman from Diffie-Hellman. It's a one-way system and it only uses public keys to encrypt and private keys to decrypt. With this version, it could only provide confidentiality, but not non-repudiation. Knapsack is also no longer considered secure. So remember, asymmetric encryption is also called public key encryption, or is referred to as using PKI, which is just public key infrastructure. The 6 asymmetric encryption types you need to know about is RSA and DSA, LGML and Knapsack, Diffie-Hellman, and elliptic curve.